the year 1994 hit, and so did the show that turned the sitcom world on its head. One of the longest running sitcoms of all time. They'll be there for you when the rain starts to fall. I am, of course, talking about the one and only Friends. From the moment I saw this show, I was a fan for life, and I think it's the greatest sitcom ever made. Okay, that's a load of old hogwash. Not quite the case, and I'll explain why. I saw clips of the show in my early teen years, and I had absolutely zero interest in this show. I just saw it as a silly show with too many references to sex and silly jokes, and I just didn't get it, so I largely ignored it. I was more into other sitcoms at this point, and then there was that episode. Now normally I would be dissecting the characters of the show, but first we'll take a little detour into how I got into Friends. I just happened to be spending the summer with a family friend, and the show that they were into was Friends. Everybody was sitting down and watching it, and it would have been very antisocial of me to not join in, so I sat and watched. And without realizing it, I was really into it, and this time, for real, I was hooked. Especially with the way the episode ended with that big famous kiss scene with Ross and Rachel. Having not watched the show from the beginning, I did not know what all the fuss was about. And then that was that, until the very next episode I watched, which was the one with the prom video. So again, watching this I was a little confused, as I just thought they only got together. But Ross was already trying to bring Rachel back, and I was like, what, they broke up already? Rachel tells Ross to accept that they will never be together, and Ross is left heartbroken. Then all the events led to that videotape of the prom of when Ross was supposed to have taken Rachel, but was left heartbroken when she went on the date with her high school boyfriend Chip. This leads to the long, slow walk to the second biggest moment of the show. The kiss that finally got them together. So it was the love story of Ross and Rachel that got me hooked into Friends, and this was in season 2. Just to point out, I do vaguely remember the final episode of season 1 of Rachel finding out about Ross and going to meet him at the airport and hearing Madonna's Say Goodbye playing in the background. But as I wasn't into Friends yet, it just kind of slid by me. Now that I was hooked, I wanted to know how the story panned out. Over here in the UK, Friends was a staple of Channel 4 where it aired during its entire initial 10-year run. Having already mentioned some of the love story between Ross and Rachel, how about the other 4 characters? What were their roles in the show? Well, my first initial thoughts of the show being about the love was quickly changed, and I saw that the show was more of an ensemble with all 6 characters key to the success of the show. You've more than likely watched the show, so you know what the premise was all about. 6 young folk, all in their early to mid-20s and trying to get on with their lives in the Big Apple, New York City. Just like some other sitcom about 6 young people living in New York. That's a very funny coincidence, isn't it? The main characters, Monica, Chandler, Phoebe, Joey, Ross, and Rachel, who all hung out a lot together, mostly at the coffee shop, Monica's apartment, and Chandler's place too. Having already mentioned Ross and Rachel several times already, I'm going to give them a backseat for now, and now look at the other characters and some of their more memorable spots on the show. The first character to come to mind is Monica, played by Courtney Cox. She was instantly recognizable to me as she was in one of my favorite action movies when I was a kid, Masters of the Universe, where she played a character named Julie. On Friends, her character Monica is described as something of a kook, a person with a bit of an OCD complex. Okay, a lot of the OCD, and was quite the neat freak and always had to be in control, even calling the phrase, I know! In many ways, she was like the voice of reason within the group and was always there for her gal pals. She also had plenty of hilarious back and forth with the group, with Ross and Rachel being the main culprits, which led to many funny dynamics with the characters. She also had a special place for Chandler, more on that later. She also had a funny rapport with Joey as well, and we find out in a future episode that she did have the hots for him, but that quickly went downhill as Joey managed to botch any chance they had of hooking up by doing this. Now, interestingly though, there was another time where she was in a bad way and wanted to hook up and was looking to get with Joey but ended up sleeping with Chandler. The perfect segue to the next port of call. From season 1 you could see little glimpses of the two getting together, as they always seemed to be near each other and they looked rather cozy. This began to expand in season 3 when Chandler just can't let it go about them maybe hooking up, which Monica seemed a little receptive to. Until we found out that Chandler peed on her. Yeah, there was no getting together after that. None whatsoever. Monica was stung by a jellyfish and apparently peeing was the only thing that could kill the pain. Which, by the way, I have done a research online on Google and in fact it's not even true. Peeing makes it worse. Who came up with that dumb idea? Wow. Anyway, moving on. In what was seen as one of the biggest shocks of the show's run, Monica and Chandler hooked up one fateful night in London when Ross was getting married. Not to Rachel though, more on that later. This tryst, as you will, turned out to be the beginning of a love story that in my opinion superseded the main attraction of Ross and Rachel. I will get back to that later as well. They're piling up now. As a character, Monica was at times overbearing with her need to be in control all the time. But as I said earlier, she was also the voice of reason within the group, and more often than not, she was there for friends when it really counted. The next character on the list is Phoebe, easily the most annoying and unique character of the group. She was ditzy at times, really out there with her strange theories on life in general. From the off, it's clear that she's a standout from the rest of the group. Over time, she made famous the name Smelly Cat, a song that was crafted about a cat. A nice segue into the fact that she loved playing the guitar and wasn't really particularly good at it. Not to mention that singing voice.
Now, your mom and your dad said she moved to Peru, but the truth is she died and someday you will too. La 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 la.
Yikes. Now in this episode, Phoebe manages to land herself a deal to do a music video on the song, but in typical Phoebe fashion, the whole thing hilariously falls apart. And during the actual music video, she's clearly being voiced up by a better singer, but Phoebe thinks that it's her, much to the chagrin of the rest of the group. Some standout moments for Phoebe included her run in season 4 when she was pregnant in real life and was written very cleverly into the show. She agrees to become the surrogate mother for her brother Frank and his wife Alice. As a result of the pregnancy, Lisa Kudrow was unable to fly to London where they filmed the season finale for season 4. During the show's 100th episode, Phoebe gives birth to triplets, and then there's a very touching moment where she spends time with all 3 babies, with the realization that she has to give them up as she had initially wanted to keep one. She was a bit of a serial dater and had plenty of men during the course of the show. She had an on and off relationship with the character David from Minsk. There was a very funny episode with Charlie Sheen, who played a Marine named Ryan. The two had planned to spend a few days together, but Phoebe ends up with the chickenpox, which she happens to pass on to Ryan, and the two have to quarantine in Monica's apartment. Now, I'm not really sure why she just couldn't go back to her apartment. That makes no sense. And the two have to improvise and then spend time in the apartment, which came with its fair share of laugh out loud moments. Then around season 9 came her most significant relationship in the show. Enter Mike Hannigan. Joey is supposed to set up Phoebe on the blind date, and of course everything goes haywire when Phoebe finds out that Mike was a last minute setup and not the best buddy that Joey had lied about. Somehow Mike falls for Phoebe and tries to win her over, so he improvises, playing an air piano at Phoebe's insistence, and she ends up falling for him and the two become a couple. Now I won't go too much into the relationship, but here are the cliff notes. Mike says he's in love, but doesn't want to get married as his first marriage failed. They break up. David makes another play for Phoebe by proposing to her. Now with some encouragement from Monica, Mike steps back in and he proposes, to which Phoebe says no. No to the proposal, but yes to getting back with Mike now that he's all on board with the idea of getting married. And this ends David's chances completely. In season 10, Mike and Phoebe get married after a snowstorm threatens to cancel the wedding. Come the final episode, Phoebe and Mike end up together, and the two plan on having kids of their own. Whilst Phoebe was a very unique individual, she was very loyal, committed to her friends, but almost to a fault. But hey, that's what friends for. Oh, did I mention that she was the oddball of the group? She really was an oddball. Join me for part 2 when I look into the greatest bromance story ever told, the dynamic duo of Joey and Chandler. See you in the next video.